Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
In the midst of what seems like a giant experiment to see how many fundamental freedoms the average person is willing to forfeit in the shortest amount of time, one BC politician has taken a logic over political correctness approach to trying to get churches and other places of worship to be viewed as essential. Drea Humphrey here with Rebel News, and finally, I bring you good news. One of our lovely supporters at Rebel News emailed me an article by Castanet that read, "Worship is essential. Vernon Council passes motion to support places of worship as an essential service." Now, if you are a supporter here at rebelnews.com, you know we've also been advocating for churches and places of worship to be labeled appropriately as essential services. According to Castanet, Vernon, BC's Councillor Scott Anderson brought forth a motion for the places of worship after a representative of Canadian Reformed Church of Vernon requested him to do so. And all but two, Mayor Victor Cumming and Councillor Brian Curring, supported the motion. This means the next step for the City Council will be to write to the provincial government to urge that places of worship be labeled as essential services. Hopefully they'll listen. Now, recently I've covered examples of how, by order of BC's Public Health Officer, Dr. Bonnie Henry, bars, salons, and busy malls are open, while churches that have been linked to zero COVID-19 cases and have COVID-19 plans in place are being fined, having their pastors and congregants be threatened with arrest, and are even being threatened with a call to the CRA, which suggests that the church could lose their T3010 charitable organization status. Now, I sat down to interview Anderson. I wanted to know more about the politician who wasn't afraid to give a voice to the cries of those desperate for the church to be open. Cries like that of this teenager who went to 100 Mile House Baptist Church because their doors were open for worship after quitting her own church's youth group because of this.
And so after that, I quit going to youth. I just feel like Zoom doesn't feed the kids the same way as that physical contact does.
Now, you can catch that full report at rebelnews.com and more just like it. But for now, meet Councillor Anderson and hear why he decided to bring forth this motion. Thank you so much for being here, Councillor Anderson.
Oh, you're quite welcome.
And why don't you just tell us a little bit about your background in politics?
Well, my background in politics is, I've been a member of conservative political party since, I think, 1988, which is quite a while ago when I was in grad school. Since then, I've been a campaign manager for a couple times. I've been leader of the BC Conservative Party for about 2 years. And I'm a two-term city councillor in Vernon, BC right now.
All right. And so in Vernon, BC, you brought forward a motion recently to have the churches be recognized as essential during these hard times. What brought you to do that?
Well, I mean, to be clear, this motion is not about asking the churches to be thrown open and let people flock in. That seems to be a point that people aren't grasping, or that other politicians aren't grasping. What I am asking is for churches and houses of worship, not specifically Christian churches, but houses of worship across the country, across the province, to be granted essential service status, which would put them in the same category as cannabis stores, pubs, big box stores, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So it would mean then that people can, in fact, go to church under the same public health order stipulations as they can in any of the other things that are open right now. And in BC, it's not as bad as Ontario. It's not like Ontario and Quebec where everything is closed up completely.
Right.
They have kind of left some of the essentials open, many of the essentials actually, and pubs, of course. And I own a small junk removal company that is also classified as an essential service. And I would think that churches most certainly fit within a category of being essential certainly for many people.
You're saying you just want equal treatment. And
Yes.
coupled on that, there is this issue of constitutional rights as well, when we're not treating these places equal to a pub or a dollar store. But in addition to that, they do have some constitutional rights. So,
well, I'm not a lawyer. I can't speak to the constitutionality of this. That is being dealt with by numerous groups: Canadian Civil Liberties Association, the BC Civil Liberties Association, the Justice Centre for Constitutional Reform, and numerous houses of worship are taking this to court. I can't really speak to that. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not trained in the law, and I don't intend to do that, nor am I approaching it from a religious point of view. There's a religious argument for this as well. I'm frankly one of those people who goes to church on Christmas Eve. I'm not a churchgoer. In fact, the reason I'm bringing this forward is because a church group in Vernon approached me and asked me to do that. So I'm just doing this to represent my constituents. My argument about this is based on common sense only. If we're going to open stores across, I mean, big box stores, you can access food online, you can access cannabis online, you can access alcohol online. Technically, there's no reason for those to be open. If they are open, if they are deemed essential services in the brick and mortar iteration of them, there's certainly no reason why churches also can't be under the same category. There seems to be the sense that folks are going to go to church and start hugging and kissing and licking each other's faces or whatever. I mean, if you can trust people to sit in a bar, in a pub, and drink liquor, and with cannabis smoke wafting in off the street, if you can do that in a situation like that, surely on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday morning, you can trust constituents or people to go to church sober and obey the rules. I mean, they're going to church because there's already a bond. I don't want to say of obedience, but of respect between the pastor or the church leader, house of worship leader, the worship leader, and the community already. And so they are not going to, if they are told not to do things, they're not inclined to do that.
Now, in your experience being a counselor in Vernon, have you seen sort of when churches were open, did you see that there was outbreaks happening more in that community versus schools or versus gyms or anything like that?
Well, the provincial health officer in BC did, when she refused to open churches or houses of worship, did reference outbreaks in churches. And I think the ones that most of those were in the United States with very few rules in place. The last one in BC that happened was before the mask mandate came down and before the latest set of PHO rules came down. And there was one that happened 2 weeks before that mandate happened, and several weeks before she referenced it as a cause. We recently had a major outbreak at a ski hill. And ski hills are essential services, as they should be, I think. But there was a large outbreak. I think several hundred people, or at least over 100 people, came in contact with that particular outbreak. And yet we're not closing ski hills, and we're not closing all of these other places where outbreaks have occurred. The religious leaders I've talked to have shown a great willingness to modify their services. I understand that singing, for instance, some of the contact that goes on in various religious services are clearly not appropriate. And they have modified already, even for their online services, those actions that bring people in close contact with each other. And again, they've shown a great willingness to modify their service according to that. So I really think that this is... it's a reasonable request to simply being lumped in with all of these other things that are open.
You also, earlier on in the pandemic, voiced concerns about whether or not the way that we were addressing COVID-19 was going to be worse than the virus itself. One of the things that you said, I believe, you can correct me if you're wrong, is that it's not as simple as dollars versus lives, as a lot of people seem to think it is. It's people's livelihoods and all of our futures. Now, you said that regarding a lockdown, the lockdowns. And you were right, actually. There's tons of information available to back up that was a legitimate concern, although it might not have been a popular one. The World Health Organization has pleaded for leaders to stop using lockdowns. Suicide rates went up, domestic violence rates went up. Our overdoses have gone up. So it's very important for us to have voices like yours. Now, when you put this motion forward, I've noticed that some, if not most, of the news articles that are reporting on it are kind of leading with, Dr. Bonnie Henry saying, the faith is not a building, and also always addressing the point that there's a lot of religious leaders that are okay with this, that they think the right thing to do is to close. So are you getting another side to that at all, or?
Oh, absolutely. I think there are 2 points. One is, I think our great failure in all of this, in our response to the pandemic, is to rely, I think, on rules and regulations rather than advice. There's a great distrust, not only of politicians, but it works the other way around. Politicians don't trust the public either. And this is quite apparent in some of these rules that they come up with. I'm going to read something from a former Minister of Justice and Attorney General of British Columbia. Over last weekend, she said this: "Plenty of criticism for the hypocrisy of elected senior officials who make policy, but go beyond the policy themselves because they believe they know how to conduct themselves safely. Fact is, they probably do, as do most of the public. The public can and will generally do the right thing when policymakers go wrong. I'd like to see more reliance on clearly articulated guidelines rather than tough rules and penalties. Not everyone will follow the guidelines, but the rule breakers are going to break the rules no matter what. Let families see each other. Let churches open. Let outdoor team sports resume. People are smart and don't want themselves or families to get COVID, and they want this pandemic to end." That's a reasonable position. It is a reasonable position for 2 reasons. One is it makes sense, and the other is people. We can disagree on the efficacy of the rules. We can disagree on the degree of concern we should be showing about this pandemic, but nobody wants to get sick. We can all agree on that. And so people aren't generally going to put themselves in the firing line as some sort of political statement. I think I go to the gym regularly. People are very good about wearing masks. They have to wear masks. They're very good about cleaning the equipment, which is actually a good thing because gyms are known to be cesspools.
Yes.
And I haven't been sick for a year now. So, I mean, this is a good thing from it. But that's people using common sense. And I think we can generally trust people to use common sense because, as Susan Anton, the former minister, said, the rule breakers are going to break the rules anyway.
Yep, absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And I get a lot of emails. The religious leaders, maybe most or half of them, are on board with continuing to have their doors closed. But the congregation, I get the emails from the people who are suffering because of that. So I want to thank you, and also a lot of the members who signed off on this to help this pass. And I hope that it's successful. We will be following this closely at Rebel News.
Oh, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you'd like to support Vernon City Council with their plans to urge BC's Premier to deem places of worship essential, you can email Councillor Anderson at sanderson.vernon.ca. And if you are a church or other place of worship or even a business that is ready to open your doors, head to iwillopen.com. That's where we at Rebel will stand with you and give you a platform to tell your story about why it's essential to open.